So the idea to make my own movement came about 6 or 7 years ago. I wanted to do something very classic, so we decided to do a 16-line manual line movement that could also be a base for other things that we could do to it, something that we could use for other complications, but start with the classic traditional manual line movement. I also wanted something that was very American. So taking the design, I've always loved one of the Howard model watches. I loved all of the early American watches from the 28th century, late 19th century, especially the railroad models. But Howard made a model called the Edward Howard, which was their highest quality model. And the bridge design that was very, very beautiful. So I took inspiration from that in the 801 to use a very similar bridge shapes, nice curves, flowing lines, to really make an attractive movement. Then the next step was to see how we could actually make this thing. It's very expensive to make your own caliber, your own ABOSH. From the next step, then we would prototype parts, put together movements, see where we need to make changes or adjustments. Improvements. Whenever you design something, often during the process, you come up with other ideas that you didn't originally have. And that was also along with the process. So there were improvements and things that we made, decided to jewel the mainspring barrel, decided to do some very nice finishing on the winding wheels, use traditional screws to hold the dial on. So we wanted to make a very traditional movement. So there's a number of things along the way that changed, which also slowed the process somewhat, but in the end result made a better product, a better movement at the end. So I'm very happy with the results of what we have with Caliber 801. Caliber 801 is the first high-grade mechanical movement made in a series since the late 1960s, 1969 or so. So that's over 35 years since there's been a watch made in a series like this. So it is the first American-made movement in all that time, and it's something, and it's going to continue to be a work in progress, because we're always going to want to add to it, improve it, and do things like that over the years. So we plan to use it for a very long time. There's other companies in the United States, watch brands and watch companies, but really RGM is the only one that's manufacturing a movement, assembling, finishing of that movement here in the United States. We're also making many of the dials that we have, doing the guilloche, the engine turning right here in our shop. We have several machines for that. That's a handmade process. Our intent is to do more and more in the United States, making more and more things here that we can over the years, and that's really our focus. So you'll probably see our watch line will kind of narrow a little bit, but the products will improve and become more and more US-based. Locally, we have partnered with a company that does a lot of work in the aerospace, medical industries, automobile racing, and they have a lot of CNC capabilities. So we've taken our designs, our solid model CAD, and we've had them run the CNC work for us, and that's done about 5 miles from here. So you will see Haas CNC machines cutting the main plates, cutting the bridges. There's also EDM wire erosion machines that make setting parts, winding parts, the click spring, for instance, parts out of steel like that. So there's a number of parts that are made CNC, and then those parts are finished here. Specifically bridges and plates. One of the first things that we do is we have to tap the holes that the screws will go into. So those holes are tapped. There's several of them, several different sizes. There's also tappings vertical from the side, like for instance for the dial screws. So there's quite a bit of work there. Then we go to reaming the holes for the jewels. So the holes that are already milled for the jewels are slightly undersized. So then we will ream those with a precision reamer to the exact size, so that they will have the right amount of tension when we press in the jewels. So once those are done, there's also pressing in the jewels. Some of the finishing work that we do on the bridges and plates, for instance, are pearlage or pearling. That's little spun circles that you see on a lot of high-end watches. Also the anglage or the beveling, the polishing of the angles on the bridges. There's several steps involved with polishing those angles. Also the Côte de Genève, or the line finishing on top of the bridges. That's another process that is done in the decoration process. So it's a combination of doing technical and precise things so that the watch will function, but also aesthetical things. So it has all the elements of a high-end watch to the eye also. After that, then the parts go for plating. They're sent out, they're plating. We use plating such as rhodium, gold plating, sometimes a combination of both. The parts are brought back here. Often then the final setting of the jewels, adjusting of the jewels for the end shape of the wheels are done. Then we start putting in the barrel and the train wheels, balance, the pallet, the parts that actually make the watch run. But we took the flat winding wheels and we wanted to decorate them. At first we had radial finish, polished bevel, wheels that looked very nice on the movement, but something looked a little missing. Didn't really look complete. Because of the design of the bridges and all the open areas, the solid wheels just didn't quite look right. So what we did is we took a cue from earlier American watches again, and we put a deep polished moat recess into these wheels, which is quite difficult to attain a wide mirror finish polish. But we got a beautiful mirror finish polish in there, like watches of old, and then a nice radial finish, and then also beveling the teeth and polishing those. And then when that went on to the movement, it really tied everything together, and it looks quite stunning. And it all looks right. It looks just the way it's supposed to be. So that one little element there was also a very important finishing element. Some people ask me, is it important that we make parts here or build the movement here? And yes, it is. I mean, it's always been my goal to do more and more here in the United States. And with the 801, you know, that was kind of like the forefront project for us in doing that. So making many of the parts, the most important parts, the biggest parts, the majority of the movement here was a priority for me. And not only did I want to do it in the United States, it was also just as important, or even more important, to make it here in Pennsylvania. We wanted to make it locally in Pennsylvania, not just the United States. So it was important to find companies also locally that we could work with and doing as much as we possibly could right here in our workshops in Mount Joy. So in Switzerland, you have the whole support allied industry there. So it's very easy for companies there, watch companies there, to go down the street and have certain parts made, have certain parts finished, access to certain capabilities and things that we don't have here. So it is a challenge to make a watch movement here in modern times without that support industry. So there's a lot of things that we had to work out and find a new way. For instance, even the Côte de Genève, the line finish from the movement, we had to find a new way. The old machines in Europe are all bought up and gone. There's only a couple companies that make new machines. They're very expensive and they're mainly made for production work. So it really didn't make sense to buy one of those machines. So we actually had a machine made locally and developed by someone here in Lancaster County that we use to put the line finishes. So we found a new way to do it, and it does a superb job. So that's just one thing. We had to work with the CNC people we talked about because they don't know anything about watches, but they know the process of making parts by CNC. So it is a challenge to make things here, but it's getting easier and easier for us as we make individual parts and succeed and move on to other things. So our capabilities are growing and growing in making parts here, and we just intend to keep going in that direction. Engine turning is something I've always loved. I've always loved to see the beautiful guilloche patterns, especially on watches. Probably Breguet was the most famous for using it on his watches. We see different companies using it nowadays. It's a handmade process done on antique machines. The machines themselves are hard to find. So years ago, when my fascination grew with this, and I've always used it on my watches, even from the beginning, I would seek out individuals that could do this kind of work around the world. There aren't many of them. But then I also started to seek out the machinery, which is very difficult to find. And I've been very fortunate to find a number of machines over the years. I now have in my workshop now, here in Mount Joy, we have 5 machines. We have 3 round machines, 3 Rose engines, and 2 straight line machines. All beautiful old machines in beautiful condition. It's a handmade work and takes many years to really know how to use these machines and to get something of a quality that's really usable. We're making very beautiful dials. We make a lot of custom dials for individuals. Here's a beautiful dial here that has been cut recently, within the last week or so. These dials are very special to me that we can do this here, because it's an art, and it's something you don't see anymore, or very, very infrequently. There's a lot of companies that try to mimic this by stamping, but ours are individually cut, real guilloche, real engine turning. So we take a lot of pride in doing that. The 801, we have real engine turn dials, real guilloche dials. We also have other types of dials you can get on it. One unique thing that we're doing with the 801 is we've actually taken the main plate of the movement, and on the dial side we have engraved 3 numbers and 2 rings to create a chapter ring. So we actually have a dial right on the movement, and by having those engraved chapter rings too, we can engine turn up to them and then in the center and actually create an engine turn dial right on the movement itself. And having a dial right on the movement is something you really don't see nowadays. I don't remember seeing a watch exactly like that at all. So it's a very unique idea, and incorporating that handmade art right on the movement itself creates a stunning effect. And then you can also see the winding parts themselves. You can see the hour wheel and the minute wheel, and you can see when you pull it in the set and you turn the hand. You can see that working, yet you still have a visible dial on the watch. Or the customer could opt for an individual separate guilloche dial that we can put on there. We have some standard dials that we use, but we can also make a custom dial. So that's a unique option also. But the art of guilloche is something very special in the watch industry, and here at RGM we're doing it right here in Pennsylvania. It's always been my dream to make my own movement. That's the heart of the watch.